GRIAN is one of the most well-known builders on the platform today, but he's also quite notorious as a prankster, a trickster, and most importantly, he's done roleplay on servers before. Now, I'm not saying this will happen, but hey, you guys seem to enjoy the last video in this series, so here you go. My idea for what could happen if GRIAN, the master of pesky birds and the creator of the amazing builds you're looking at on screen now, joined the Dream SMP. Suspend your disbelief, if you will, and imagine this scene. GRIAN is falling, air rushing past him, causing even his usually tidy waffle-like haircut to be disturbed off a cliff. How did he get here? Well, the story was long. It would take about 3 lifetimes to explain, but all GRIAN was doing now was trying to remember, desperately clinging on to the memories of his past, desperately trying to stay. He hits something sandy, blacking out, and before his consciousness fades, the object shifts and gives way, and he falls further, landing on a grass field with a muffled thump. Groaning slightly from his pounding headache, GRIAN's eyes flutter open to loud yells in the distance, interspersed with moments of dead silence, followed by raucous laughter, seemingly from 2 people. He couldn't remember who he was, how he had got here, or who the people in the distance were, but saw a floating name tag above his head that read, GRIAN. Assuming that the world had somehow labeled him and that his name was GRIAN, he slowly crept over the hill to see 2 young teenage boys building a large cobblestone tower in the shape of a massive cuboid. Squinting a little closer, he managed to make out their names above their heads, Tommy Init and Tubbo _, which seemed like weird names to him. Hearing their playful banter, however, GRIAN came up with an idea. He had no idea as to whether the kids would be hostile towards an outsider, especially one who claimed to have just appeared here, and so he quietly snuck towards the chest close to the campsite. If he could rustle up something to pacify the duo, maybe he could learn a little more about why he was here on the server, who he was apart from just the name GRIAN. To his delight, he found TNT in the chest, and something seemed to instinctually click with our red-jumpered protagonist. Building up a few blocks, GRIAN started to slowly draw out a circle with a layer of TNT, humming a tune to himself as he did so. This tune seemed to be catchy, or at least it was catchy enough for a nearby parrot to flutter towards him. Brushing it aside with a smile, "Pesky bird," he muttered under his breath, GRIAN continued placing TNT. "Who are you?" a distinctly British voice yelled from behind him. Scrambling back, GRIAN trips over himself and holds his hands up as Tubbo, as you can see from his name tag, levels his sword at him. Trying to get on his good side, GRIAN points to his name and explains, slowly backing away with every word, until he bumps into the other kid, named Tommy, standing behind him. GRIAN frantically tries to explain that he was a stranger who was dropped into the world from some otherworldly dimension, and that he had no ill intentions. As expected, Tubbo didn't believe a word of this, instead taking the TNT as a sign that GRIAN was an agent sent to kill him and Tommy, and demanding that he be locked up in a cell in Snowchester for further questioning, wherever Snowchester was. GRIAN, now stuck in prison, could hear his captors discussing how they'd get him to tell the truth, even saying that they'd go to further and further extremes to get a story they believed out of him, until he finally cracked. That didn't sound appealing at all to GRIAN. Who were these people anyway? And he frantically scanned the cell, looking for some way to get out. It wasn't the most secure thing in the world. The cobblestone walls could be fairly easily broken with just a fist, but that would take too long. He needed to get out now, get as much of a head start as he possibly could, and run for quite literally his life before they tracked him down. Spotting a crimson fungus in the corner, presumably having grown from the red vines he had seen all around the server, and some bones on the floor that seemed to belong to the last prisoner, GRIAN had a plan. Using the bones, he created bone meal and grew the fungus into a supersized version of itself, replacing the cobblestone and giving him a quick escape. Quickly chopping down the tree with his fists, he crafts a pickaxe and a hoe, cleaning up the rest of the tree and replacing the walls before bolting away from the prison, running as fast as he possibly could. He had got about 100 blocks away before he heard the confused cries erupt from the prison, the frantic footsteps of the entirety of Snowchester running up the stairs, echoing across the landscape. He's got a pretty large lead and tries to throw them off his tracks by jumping over a river, and almost manages to stop and catch his breath when, "GRIAN, do not try to run or I will kill you. Then I will find where you spawn and kill you again, and again, until you are permanently dead. Do you understand me?" GRIAN raised his hands in complete surrender to the creeper-looking man, who had been labelled as Awesome Dude by the world. As Sam methodically started confiscating his items, a breathless Tubbo caught up to the duo, waving to signify that the rest were on their way. The rest of the pack arrived, announced, as seemed to be usual, by Tommy loudly arguing with a tall Enderman-like player about something he called the egg, saying that he was immune and that he would go and bring it himself. The group fell silent as Tubbo and Sam looked up at them, Sam clearly uncomfortable and wanting to escape whatever conversation he was having with Tubbo. "Can we just wait for Quack?" "We don't have time to do that, Sam," Tubbo cut him off. "And besides, we all know what's inside the prison anyway. You don't have anything to hide from us. And you'd get control over this GRIAN fella. I don't really see why you're hesitating, unless you do have something to hide, that is," Tubbo added quickly. Sam raised his shoulders for a second, looking like he would reply, and then sagged before nodding at Tubbo. The boy gave him a similar nod and turned back to the group with a grin. Clearly he had got what he wanted from the exchange. "Alright, we can't contain this guy, we don't have the facilities or the time, and quite frankly, I don't want to have to deal with another prisoner in Snowchester right now. With the whole," he throws a cautious glance at Sam, "cookie outpost situation, both me and Sam have agreed that the best course of action would just be to lock this guy up in the prison. Any objections?" A murmur rippled around the group. Wouldn't it be dangerous to throw this newcomer into a prison cell alone with Dream? But no one said anything. Nodding silently, GRIAN was dragged to his feet by Sam, who held him by the scruff of his once thick and soft red jumper and escorted him into the prison. GRIAN was terrified but intensely alert and aware of every single aspect of his surroundings as Sam made him enter the prison and then finally grumbled something to him under his breath. "This isn't going to be what you're expecting. It won't be what you want, it won't be what anyone else thinks you deserve. But in this prison, I'm the supreme authority, and I think that this punishment would do you just fine." Something about those words resonates with GRIAN, and he gets ready to confront the horrific monster named Dream that everyone had been talking about, ready to defend himself from the most savage of players. There was nothing that could prepare GRIAN for what he saw next. There were two people in the prison, not one. Sam had been hiding something, no, someone from the rest of the server, and it seemed like GRIAN was about to join the duo, destined to be trapped forever in this cage with players whose evil had been mentioned in passing near his earlier cell with an almost reverential tone. These thoughts whizzing through his mind, GRIAN didn't even realize he was in the cell until the lava started flowing down once more, the piglin hybrid man in a red cloak taking the opportunity to size him up. Glancing around the room, the tension was palpable. In one corner, sitting on a lectern and looking at GRIAN from over a diary he was scribbling in, sat Dream, his expression cold, analytical, and, surprisingly, starting to develop into one of awe. The piglin, on the other hand, his name tag reading Technolade, sized him up as he lazily slouched against the wall of his cell, tossing a potato between his hands. "So, why is your head a waffle?" The question caught GRIAN off guard, and he went to feel for the back of his head before Techno was smacked in the face by a potato that Dream had thrown at him. "What? He's new here, and he's gonna be here until you decide to actually go through with punching that damn obsidian, Dream. I'm going to be making small talk." "There's something that isn't right about him, Techno. He looks weak, his jumper is a horrible color." "Hey!" GRIAN interjected, "but we need to talk to him as little as possible. Let's put it this way, if we keep talking to him, we're going to get something much, much worse than a bell. Got it?" Techno, who had been staring at Dream with a half-annoyed, half-bored expression on his face for the most of the latter's monologue, raised his eyebrows wide at the mention of the bell, one hand subconsciously drifting towards it. You mean, you think him?" Dream nodded back silently, and GRIAN wished that he had savored those voices for longer. For the next 2 days, he heard nothing but the bubbling of lava and the sound of Techno scarfing down his potatoes, a stark contrast to Dream's stately nibbles. All attempts at conversation were met with thick, hostile silence. The bubbling of the lava slowly faded, however, after the second day. A row of dispensers ticked off above the cell, and the curtain of lava keeping the prisoners in slowly descended, a man in a white shirt and suspenders slowly advancing towards the cell across the pit of lava, a sickly sweet smile plastered across his face. "GRIAN, hey, how are you? The name's Quackty. I'm very sorry for all the confusion that's happened here, eh? Let me get you out of the company of these two criminals." He gestured for GRIAN to climb onto the platform and stuck his head into the cell, seemingly thinking that GRIAN couldn't hear him anymore. "Thanks for yelling about his powers, idiots. I'll take this from here." As Quackty turned back, GRIAN caught on his face the faintest glimpse of a villainous, evil sneer, one that he had no doubt been wearing while talking to the prisoners. And just like that, GRIAN no longer trusted Quackty. GRIAN no longer trusted anyone. His attempts at peace and stability had been rebuked again and again, from Tubbo to Dream and now to Quackty, who is clearly trying to play him for some sort of scheme. As GRIAN got more and more angry, more and more confused as to why and how he got to this wretched server, he noticed a purplish axe glinting from Quackty's belt. he would have to go along with the man, for now at least, until he had the power to run away without being instantly caught and presumably killed. Quackity had said something about powers to the other two inmates, so clearly there was some ability that he had that Quackity wanted. Clearly he had some sort of leverage. He just needed to figure out what that was. GRIAN pondered the question the entire trip back, furiously scraping at the last scraps of memory he had remaining. Why couldn't he just remember, damn it? And got so lost in thought that it came as a complete shock to him when he bumped into another person? Recalling and shaking his head, GRIAN noticed that his jumper was now sodden and stained ever so slightly green, and looking up at the man, if he could even be called that he had bumped into, he saw a vaguely translucent figure, tinted green and with an oafish grin on his face, the name tag above his head reading Slimesicle. "So sorry for bumping into you, Third Watcher GRIAN from Evo. I do not blame you for not seeing me though. I am partially transparent after all." "Charlie, shut up!" Quackity hissed, casting a quick glance at GRIAN, but it was already too late. The words, Watcher, Evo, they'd opened the floodgates in GRIAN's mind, and suddenly he realized what his being on an SMP like this, an SMP with a story, meant for him, his powers, his abilities. Slowly levitating off the ground, GRIAN started to glow with a bright white light, ascending to a form he had attained only once before. Watcher GRIAN. Watcher GRIAN was an ancient and powerful being, a being whose sole purpose was to enforce order, an omniscient being, a supreme form of justice on the servers to which he was added. With a snap of his fingers, GRIAN decided the fate of the two people most deserving of punishment, and with just a tinge of vengeance staining the action, he spared a third villain, a villain who had cheated the Watcher once before. In one instant, Dream was freed from the prison, a blow to Quackity, complete undoing of his most important achievement, destroying the one security that he had over the other major power of the server. And in the next, Dream was dead, GRIAN saving him personally with an axe and adding a title to his name of Dream Slayer. And in that death, all of Dream's tricks, all of his insurance, all of his power, everything was gone. GRIAN wasn't done. The SMP, in his opinion, and in the Watcher's opinion, has stagnated for too long, he decided. The cycles and systems that the members had settled into were too repetitive. They needed to be changed. As a Watcher, it was his duty to change the SMP. And so GRIAN did as the Watchers always have and did in Evo, using his power to uproot the server from the ground up, replacing the bedrock of the server completely, and updating the server to 1.17. That's all I've got for this video, but consider watching this video next where I talk about what might happen if Mumbo Jumbo joined the Dream SMP.